The saying goes that our actions are just a drop in the ocean when it's all said and done. Our achievements, our failures, our emotions and our wealth all are tiny specks that fall into the infinite canvas of the universe. However, for some, no ocean is deep enough to store the wealth, fame and status that their name brings. Today, we will take a look at some of those titans of society, a family so rich that, at his peak, their patriarch Aristotle Onassis was the closest thing to an owner of the ocean the world had ever seen. Indeed, the Greek mogul was a real-life Poseidon who conquered the high seas with the largest privately owned shipping fleet on planet Earth. And with it, he became so economically expansive that he was able to assuage the affection of a heartbroken Jackie Kennedy after her husband, US President John F. Kennedy, was assassinated. In today's episode, join us as we show you what it means to cruise the high seas of unimaginable wealth and fame as we explore the Onassis family, the $2 billion dynasty that owned the ocean. In his prime years, Aristotle Onassis wasn't just rich and powerful. He had more money than a person could spend in 10 lifetimes and enough influence to govern the behavior of future generations to come. Before his death in 1975, Onassis had amassed a wealth of approximately $500 million, a figure that, adjusted for inflation, is equal to $2.3 billion today. And remember, this wasn't a time when you could grow your wealth by selling books on the internet or hedging your money on Bitcoin. Rather, it was a time when money could only be amassed through physical labor and immaculate business strategy, two traits that Onassis had in excess. And his economic and social power largely came from his army of ships, an army which contained over 70 vessels, one which dominated the seas, disregarded shipping practices and sailed tax-free. Because, when you own the ocean, who's going to tell you otherwise? And Onassis's power over the ocean sparked the interest of the highest caliber of society. Not mere politicians or celebrities, but members of multiple royal families who simply had to get a taste for the financial gains the man could bring. In Monaco, for instance, Onassis developed a relationship with Prince Rainier III, acquiring the Société des Bains de Mer de Monaco, an umbrella company which gave Onassis influence over the higher echelons of Mediterranean society through the Monte Carlo Casino and Hotel de Paris. And in Saudi Arabia, Onassis was able to secure a tanker transport deal with none other than the King of Saudi Arabia. This deal could only be stopped by the government, who were forced to launch an FBI investigation on him to prevent Onassis from single-handedly jeopardizing the US government's monopoly deal. And Onassis even had influence at 30,000 feet through his private airline, Olympic Airways, founded in 1957. Because when you're as rich as Onassis was, why would you ever consider boarding a plane that doesn't have your name on it? Furthermore, with such influence across every square foot of the globe came unprecedented fame. And not just the type of fame that would cause the local newspapers to harass you outside your door. It's the type of notoriety that would cause the grieving widow of a former president to come running into your arms. Yes, you heard that right. Onassis was the only man Jackie Kennedy deemed worthy enough to fill the boots of her late husband, choosing to marry Onassis in 1968. And what better way to assert your dominance than by marrying Jackie on your own private Greek island of Scorpios? And when he wasn't viewing the sunset on his private island, Onassis was sailing through the oceans that he controlled on his yacht, Christina O, experiencing the medieval thrill of walking the grounds of his privately owned French castle, or perhaps looking over the streets of Manhattan from his high-rise property. As you can see, Onassis's life was one that most mortals can merely dream of experiencing. However, his life was not always one of private islands, royal relationships, and immense influence. Rather, it started from much more humble roots. And to show you the true origin of Aristotle Onassis, we need to travel back to ancient Greece. The origins of the name Onassis are somewhat contested. However, it is widely accepted that the name is of ancient Greek descent. Some are of the belief that this name, translated, means lover, while others suggest it translates to favored one. If the success of Aristotle Onassis is anything to go by, the later translation certainly makes more sense. The ancestors of Aristotle Onassis were likewise not recorded with any consistency, and the earliest known ancestor of the Onassis family is Aristotle's father, Socrates Onassis. Socrates was born in Piraeus, Greece, sometime in the 1880s. Now, at this time, Greece was not exactly the country that it is today. Instead of world-class amenities, excellent food and tourist hotspots, the country was plagued with a lack of raw materials, debt, and an unstable government. Because of this, the only real way to make money was by exporting goods to other countries. And knowing this, Socrates, with the help of his brother, created his own tobacco business in the late 1800s. This soon proved to be an excellent financial decision. Business became so good, in fact, that in the early 1900s, Socrates made the decision to move to the Ottoman Empire to expand his business and take over a new market. He then settled in the city of Smyrna, now known as Izmir. During this time, Socrates met his future wife and mother of Aristotle, Penelope de Log. Again, little is known of this surname, except the fact that it is of Ottoman descent. In approximately 1902, the pair were married, and with business booming, the future looked bright for the Onassis family. So bright, in fact, that the two decided to have a child. And on the 6th of January 1906, Aristotle Onassis was born. Aristotle's early years were about as good as any young man could wish for. Despite not performing excellently in school, Aristotle proved keen to learn the art of business, quickly becoming the shadow of his father to learn everything about the tobacco export industry. This eagerness to learn was only endorsed by his father, who had plans to have his son carry on the family business. However, when Aristotle was just 6 years old, disaster struck, as his mother tragically died of unknown causes. Further tragic news followed in 1921, as the events of World War I saw the Turkish army invade his hometown of Smyrna. The Turkish then began a campaign to eliminate any Greeks from the city, forcing the Onassis family to leave their home, business, and future prospects behind. With nowhere else to go, the family made its way to Athens, Greece, where they would at least be safe. However, the economic landscape in Greece at the time was still uncertain, and the financial prospects of the Onassis family had been completely shattered. They were homeless, helpless, and hopeless. Faced with an uncertain future, Aristotle had one of two options. He could choose to blame the world for his problems, or he could conquer it. As we'll see in the second chapter, he chose the second. Armed with his father's wisdom, $60 in his pocket, and a dream in his soul, Aristotle chose to seek fame and fortune in the land of freedom, the United States of America. And classed as an Anatolian refugee, he attempted to immigrate to the country. However, strict immigration quotas quickly stifled Onassis's plans. Therefore, he decided to test his luck elsewhere, traveling to the alluring country of Argentina and eventually settling down in the bustling capital of Buenos Aires. Then, in 1923, Aristotle landed his first job as a telephone engineer. From a financial perspective, the role wasn't exactly lucrative. However, by eavesdropping on high-end business calls, Onassis was able to earn a different kind of remuneration, that of business secrets. Eventually, Aristotle's plan paid off, as he overheard a new idea about a talkie, which would have the main character smoke a cigarette. Armed with his experience in the tobacco industry, Onassis decided to jump on this idea before anyone else had the chance. Initially, he attempted to negotiate a deal with an existing Argentine tobacco company. However, negotiations broke down, forcing Onassis to create his own corporation. To make his brand stand out, Onassis imported tobacco from Turkey, as he knew that it had a sweeter flavor than the Argentines were used to. He also aimed his products at women, managing to secure opera singer Claudia Musio as the face of the brand. And Onassis's idea was an immediate success. Sales began pouring quicker than he could handle, and within just 2 years, he had earned over $100,000, equal to almost $2 million in today's currency. In 1928, the Greek government negotiated a trade agreement with Argentina, making Onassis the consul general. Such a position gave Onassis the ability to not only sell tobacco, but to manufacture cigarettes and trade various commodities. And by the time he was 25, he was officially a millionaire, even by the standards of 1920s dollars. However, as the business started to grow, Aristotle realized that he was on the wrong side of the table. Despite earning a life-changing sum of money, he noticed that the shipping companies who transported the tobacco he sold made more than the manufacturers who sold the final product. So, in 1932, while every other entrepreneur was battening down the hatches to survive the harsh winter of the Great Depression, Aristotle made the decision to change the direction of his business, with the intention of controlling the ocean. His venture started with the purchase of 2 ships, which he was able to buy at a heavy discount thanks to the poor economic landscape. Naming them after his parents, Onassis's voyage officially began as he started running Atlantic trade routes. An oil tanker joined the ranks in 1938, followed by a further 2 the next year. And these ships opened up opportunities to ship commodities like oil between the US and Japan. And even when trade stopped during World War II, Onassis was able to profit by leasing his fleet to the Allies. Fueled by determination and the prospects of financial domination, Aristotle began an aggressive expansion of his fleet in 1945. By 1955, he had increased his marine power 15-fold, and by disguising his ships with the flag of Panama, he was able to avoid any kind of transport tax, massively improving his profits. Subsequent business opportunities arose as Onassis built his empire. He, for instance, purchased a majority share in the Société des Bains de Mer in 1953 before starting his own airline, Olympic Airways, in 1957. However, the 1950s also saw Onassis embroiled in legal trouble, as the FBI launched an investigation after he attempted to strike an oil contract with the King of Saudi Arabia. Coupled with his public disregard for marital loyalty, it's safe to say that he wasn't well liked in the US throughout his rise. Nevertheless, his fleet reached its peak in 1975, when Aristotle controlled over 70 vessels, with a combined shipping power of 2.5 million tons. What had started out with $60 and a dream had turned into an empire worth $500 million. Thus, Aristotle Onassis already had the money and the power. What he wanted next was the women. Throughout his epic rise, Onassis had multiple relationships which propelled him to new levels of social status and admiration. These relationships, however, also showed the dark side of this incredible entrepreneur. Onassis's dating life kicked off in the 1930s when he became engaged to Ingeborg Dedichen, the daughter of a Swedish shipowner, who Onassis was likely trying to build a relationship with. However, the relationship quickly fell apart, as Onassis engaged in episodes of drunken rage, which at their worst ended in domestic violence. Throughout the 1930s, Onassis continued to engage in a string of romantic flings, dating multiple famous women such as Greta Garbo. Then, in 1946, he met his future wife, Athina Livanos, the daughter of the richest shipping merchant in the world. Despite Onassis being almost double her age, they married, having 2 children in the following years. However, time proved that the relationship was far from healthy, and by the 50s, both were engaged in affairs. In 1957, for instance, Onassis publicly flaunted his relationship with Maria Callas, who was at the time regarded as one of the most beautiful opera singers in the world. Tired of the broken relationship, Athina divorced Aristotle in 1960, leaving Onassis open to remarrying another high-profile figure. 3 years later, tragedy unfolded in America as the well-loved President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was brutally assassinated. Hearing of this news while residing in Hamburg, Onassis immediately flew to America to pay his respects, or so he wanted the public to believe. On the surface, Onassis's presence at Franklin's funeral was motivated out of respect. However, in reality, some said he was there for one reason: Jackie Kennedy. Whatever his motives, Jackie Kennedy was, being recently widowed and having lost her child in August, alone and in a state of unimaginable depression. And so, later in the year, Onassis invited both Jackie and her sister Lee Radziwill to a party on his private yacht. They accepted the invitation, bringing powerful political figures such as Prince Stanislas Radziwill, the husband of Lee, along. During the cruise, Onassis did everything in his power to win over the affection of the former First Lady. He took her to Istanbul, Crete, and the Peloponnesian coast, and he even showed Jackie the ancient city of Smyrna. where the couple were photographed holding hands. Finally, Onassis took Jackie to his private island, where he wished for so much privacy that he removed the island from public maps. Whether anything romantic happened on the cruise is debatable. However, it was clear that the two grew extremely close after this cruise, and in time, despite receiving heavy criticism from the press, Jackie only grew closer to the much older and much wealthier billionaire. Soon, they were a match made in political heaven. Onassis had the lifestyle that Jackie craved and grown accustomed to, and Jackie had the public figure and influence that Aristotle had never been able to obtain. And so in 1968, just 5 years after the death of her legendary former husband, Jackie married Onassis on his private island. Jackie and Aristotle never had any children together. However, Onassis did have 2 children with his previous wife, Athena Livanos, Alexander, and Christina. Alexander was born in 1948 and immediately indoctrinated into the Onassis business. He never received a formal education, instead choosing to work under his father for just $12,000 a year. Despite not being spoiled, Alexander appears to not have had the same drive as his father. He was frequently described as a brat, and some even suggested that he was intimidated by his father's success. Nevertheless, Alexander was eventually appointed the head of his father's private airline, Olympic Aviation. However, this decision would unfortunately lead to a tragic early death. In 1973, when Alexander was just 24 years old, he suffered a terrible plane crash. Though surviving the initial crash, he passed from injuries just a day later. Therefore, not only did Aristotle have to bury his only son, but he also had to bury his only male heir. And 2 years later, on the 15th of March 1975, Onassis joined his son after suffering respiratory failure. The only other living heir, Christina, therefore inherited $500 million from her father, including his private island and other properties. Christina went on to have 1 child, Athena, whom she showered with more gifts than a child could ever wish for. However, despite having all of the money in the world, Christina sadly suffered from a fatal heart attack in 1988, when she was just 38 years old. Athena thus remains the only surviving descendant of the Onassis Empire, but originally didn't see any of her grandfather's wealth. This was because her father, Thierry Roussel, wanted Athena to live a relatively normal life, and so he took her to Switzerland, where despite being given $13 million a year to raise the girl by Christina's legal team, Thierry never financially spoiled his daughter so that she could learn the value of money, and it was eventually agreed that Athena would gain access to her father's estate on her 18th birthday. The pair later engaged in a legal battle as Thierry attempted to delay his daughter from receiving her inheritance after she announced that she was going to marry equestrian athlete Alvaro Alonso. However, Thierry suspected that Alonso only wanted to get married to gain access to half of Onassis's empire. Despite this, he eventually lost in court. And on the 29th of January 2003, Athena celebrated her 18th birthday, gaining access to her share of the Onassis's empire. While concrete figures were never mentioned, it's estimated that her inheritance was close to $500 million. Now, Athena also doesn't keep much of a public profile. However, in 2003, she was able to buy an $8.6 million property in Sao Paulo, so it's safe to say that she isn't living paycheck to paycheck. She married Alpanso in 2005, before divorcing him in 2017 after he reportedly attempted to take her wealth as his own. Tactfully, she didn't have to pay him a penny. In this way, we guess you could say that her late father got the last laugh in an "I told you so" moment, and he isn't rolling over in his grave. Athena was also meant to receive the management rights of Aristotle's charity, which he set up after the death of his son when she turned 21. However, the then managers of the charity decided to change the foundation's charter, effectively removing any right that Athena had to its inheritance. Nevertheless, Athena Onassis remains one of the richest young women in the world today, and despite being divided over the years, Aristotle Onassis's financial legacy continues to thrive decades after his death. And now, we'd like to see you in the comments. Which historic 20th century wealthy family would you like us to cover next? We always attempt to make videos based directly on your suggestions, so don't be shy. We look forward to hearing from you, and thanks again for joining us for another episode. Cheers, until next time.